Good evening. Welcome to the library.
Hello.
How's everyone doing?
Good.
Good. My name is David. I'm an adult librarian here in Brooklyn Heights. We're thrilled to be hosting this panel discussion tonight. A big thanks to everyone at Books Are Magic for helping us put this together. Just want to give a quick plug for a couple library events that are coming up. This Saturday we have a graphic novel discussion. It's going to be happening right here. The graphic novel Clay-Footed Giants. And in October 15th, we're partnering with with Books Are Magic again to bring Hernan Diaz back to the branch. We'll be discussing his first novel, In the Distance. So we're very excited for that. Definitely grab our calendar on the way out, sign up for our newsletter. Lots of different events happening here at this branch and every branch in Brooklyn. So definitely get on board for those. And I'm just going to give a quick plug for Books on Band. I don't know if those of you here know about it. It's an initiative that the Brooklyn Public Library started. Team up with Boston Public Library, LA County Library, San Diego Public, Seattle Public. And it's an initiative that allows teens and young adults ages 13 to 26 who live in the United States to sign up for free Books on Band e-cards from the Brooklyn Public Library that allows them to access our collection of frequently challenged and banned e-books and e-audiobooks. So wherever they are in the US, they're able to get those books through our library card. We started in 2022, and the first 10 months, 6,000 teenagers had requested cards through the program, and 52,000 books had been borrowed. So it's been a really big success. We're really proud to be partnering on this, and a portion of tonight's proceeds will be going to Books on Band. So definitely check out the books for sale in back here. I'm trying to find all of the authors here tonight, and with that, I'm going to pass it over to Molly, who will be doing the introductions. Thanks so much.
Thank you, David. Thank you to the Brooklyn Heights Public Library for partnering with us and hosting us tonight. Again, my name is Amali. I'm the events director at Books Are Magic, which, if you don't know, is a lovely little independent bookstore just a few blocks away from here. So before we officially kick off tonight's event, I just have a few logistics. We will be doing a hand-raised audience Q&A towards the end of the discussion. I'll be coming around with one of our wireless mics, so start thinking of questions to ask and hold on to them. After the talk tonight, all of the authors will be around to sign and personalize your books at the table where they're currently sitting. We'll let you know where and when to start lining up for that. And finally, if you're joining us virtually on the YouTube live stream, we would love to encourage you to buy a copy of these books online using the link in the live stream description. So, as David had mentioned, we will be sending a portion of tonight's book sales as well as 100% of your donations to the initiative Books on Band. So please feel free to see us if you want to make a donation of your choice. Books Are Magic for the past couple of months has created our Banned Books Distribution Network. We've been partnering with the Lynx bookstore in Florida, and as of this week, we raised over $7,000 for them to help distribute banned books to kids in Florida. And now we get to move on to our home of Brooklyn and get to partner with the Brooklyn Public Library's initiative of Books on Band. And we're really excited to have this event to kick off that partnership. So, now we're going to get to tonight's conversation. I'm just going to read some bios, and then they're going to dive right in. So, first up, we have Maureen Johnson, who is the author of the best-selling author of several novels, including the Truly Devious series, the Sweet Scarlet series, and the Shades of London series. She's also written collaborative works such as Let It Snow with John Green and The Bane Chronicles with Cassandra Clare. And she lives here in New York. Frederick Joseph is a Yonkers-raised two-time New York Times bestselling author. His books include a poetry collection, We Live Beloved, 2 books of nonfiction, a collaboration that When We Found It, and a children's book, The Courage to Dream, Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. Joseph's writing and philanthropic work go hand in hand, and he was most recently honored with the 2023 Malcolm X and Dr. Betty Shabazz Vanguard Award, as well as the 2024 Allyship Award at Lincoln Center's Black Girl Magic Ball. He also lives here in New York City. We've got Eliot Schrefer, who is the New York Times bestselling author of many books for kids and teens, including The Darkness Outside Us and its sequel, The Brightness Between Us. His books have twice been named finalists for the National Book Award in Young People's Literature. He is on the faculty of the Creative Writing MFA programs at Hamline University and Fairleigh Dickinson University, and also lives with his husband here in New York City. Then we've got Niña, who is an illustrator and sometimes writer, who has created many books for kids, including the #1 New York Times bestseller, I Promise, by LeBron James. She was born in the Philippines and raised in Queens, and has always been inspired by the world around her. Her work is a consistent ode to the diverse community she was raised in, and she believes that everyone deserves to see themselves reflected in the stories they read, and that we should all be celebrated. And finally, tonight's conversation is being moderated by Philomena Polifrone. Philomena is the ABA's Advocacy Associate Manager and point person for American Booksellers for Free Expression. Since she joined the ABA, she has defended free expression and the right to read, and has participated in the strategic planning for ABA's lawsuits against unconstitutional laws related to book bans in Texas and Arkansas. She wrote the ABA Right to Read Handbook, which we also have available for purchase tonight, and has supported bookstores across the country where freedom of expression and the right to read were jeopardized. Okay, these are some very, very impressive panelists. Please join me in giving them a very warm welcome. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm so excited to be here with this panel tonight. Truly incredible. And unfortunately, this tends to happen with with incredible authors. They're also banned. Sometimes I actually think that they just ban books because they're too good. But unfortunately, we know that that's not the reason. In statistics released this week by PEN America, 10,000 instances of book bans have happened since 2021. That is 3 times greater this year than the previous data point, which was last year. The crisis is getting worse. It is already historically bad in terms of the history of the United States, and that is not for lack of competition. And unfortunately, the events of this year show that it has the potential to get worse if we don't do something about it. Laws have been passed in Utah, in Idaho, in Tennessee this year, and regulations in South Carolina that present really chilling new frontiers, I guess, of book banning. And 2025 could be even worse. So, that's the bad part. Sorry, I was going to say that's the good part, but I do have one more bad part. I know, I'm sorry. Over 35% of banned and challenged books target BIPOC authors. That is books by, for, and about Black people, Indigenous people, and other people of color. A similar statistic applies to the books by, for, and about the LGBTQ+ community. They have redefined the ideas of age-appropriate literature and the concepts of what it means to do harm to minors to justify book bans for clearly politically motivated reasons. Of course, the people who experience the most harm from this are kids who need to see themselves represented in literature. The harm is also done to authors, like those who have joined us today, whose livelihood is being targeted because they are telling their stories. They're telling stories that maybe historically have not been able to be told until recently. So, here's the good news. I promised there would be good news. We've arrived. An incredible number of organizations are doing work to push against this. The backbone of this fight our libraries and librarians, shout out BPL, who has used their position with the Books Unbanned project to make book access general across the country. But so many grassroots organizations, so many bookstores like Books Are Magic, and so many other just parents who want to do something about it have been able to. And so as we're in Banned Books Week, I think we need to hold both, right? We need to hold the horrible reality of what is going on and the reasons for it, and we also have to hold the amazing activism. Banned Books Week started in 1982, the last time it was anything like this bad. I can already see the structures forming in this crisis to resist it that are going to outlast the crisis. So there, optimism, we did it. The other fun part, the good part, is getting to talk to some of the amazing banned authors and illustrators who we have with us today. I want to start with Maureen Johnson. Maureen, your book, The Bermudas Triangle, was challenged in Oklahoma in 2007 and in Florida in 2009. Can you talk a little bit about why it was challenged, how you responded, and just what it was like to go through that process?
So let's go back in time, right? 2005. 10,000 years ago. So long ago. That's embarrassing. I wrote a book called The Bermudas Triangle, which is about three friends and what happens when two of them start dating, and the last one kind of feels like a third wheel, just trying to figure out how to be in this friendship. One of the girls identifies as bisexual, one of the girls identifies as lesbian, and the third girl identifies as straight. And it's just basically about friend dynamics. And so this came out in 2005. So there weren't a lot of books that featured any kind of queer characters. We just did it. Here we go. We did the book. Then the first thing I hear is that there is a librarian in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, who contacts me and says, someone has tried to they want to take this book off the shelf. And she refused to take it. She refused to remove the book. And this began a kind of battle within the town. And she was forced out of her position. She eventually decided to leave behind her. She's like, it's time for me to go, but I'm not taking it. I'm not taking the book off the shelf. And so she left behind what I believe was a 30 or 40 year career as a librarian, refusing to take the book off the shelf. Then in 2009, back then, you hadn't only ever heard about it. Like, lots of things could have been happening, and probably were. It's only if someone kind of got in touch with you and found you, and you were harder to find. You know, there were no real social media profiles. There was like a website, and then they would sort of be able to find you. So I'm sure lots of stuff was going on that I didn't know about. But I'm told, hey, did you know your book is being challenged by these two women in Florida? I'm like, okay, great. And then I am sent a link to a clip of my book on Fox and Friends in the morning down there. And there's a picture of it, and then the two women are like, and my daughter read parts of it, and it's pornographic, and there's all this, and they describe it on the stuff that's not in the book. So I'm like, they didn't read this book. They never do. And then there was a big picture of my book with XXX written under it. No right of reply, no one ever contacted me. There was nothing. So that's what it felt like, just to kind of, just to feel like this just happens, and people are losing their jobs, and I felt terrible. I didn't know what to do to support that. I would have done anything. I'm like, do you want me to come there? Like, what do you want me to do? It feels like now we live in a very different time. I mean, the thing that makes me feel really positive is seeing all that YA has become. It's so much bigger and broader, and it has so many more people represented in those books. And all that I see when I look around from the time of where this started is everybody winning. So if there's one thing to maybe take as a positive from this, there is so much, more can be done, but it is moving in the right direction, certainly from where we were saying, like the early beginnings of whatever we start calling YA.
That was a number of years ago.
Yeah.
Does it feel like the tactics are the same, or what you're seeing authors go through now, does it feel like more of the same, or does it feel like a
Oh, those
slightly
people
more-
never read. I mean, I have some, like, I had experience in other things. I'm the chair of the New York and Connecticut for Authors Against Book Bans, which is a newly formed organization. So I got to do lots of like media training where they taught us all the positives. And I'm like, wow, that is a lot of positives, because I'm like, ugh, these are terrible. I also come from Bucks County, Pennsylvania, which is a real hotbed of this nonsense. Moms for Liberty love it. They nested there and had a brood. They had like a convention down in Philadelphia. Remember that they don't read, that book banners are non-readers that want to make other people non-readers, and that they are attention seekers. And when you challenge them with anything, they really don't have a leg to stand on, because they haven't read the books and they don't want you to read anything. And ultimately, they are sort of the Wizard of Oz. Like, they are sort of the annoying person in your community behind the curtain that, you know, pottery didn't work out for them and they need a new hobby and they would really like people to notice them, and they're like, that school board meeting, I can light that up. I've had a Red Bull, I already went to Costco, let's rock. So if we could find maybe better ways for their attention-seeking behavior, but they are attention-seeking weirdos that don't read, is my basic philosophy.
Some things never change.
Yeah.
Frederick, your book, The Black Friend, on being a better white person, was banned in Spring Branch ISD in Texas. According to local reporting, a FOIA request revealed that the district somehow spent 226 staff hours and $30,000 reviewing your book.
Wow,
And
it's flattering.
I crunched the numbers. That's the equivalent of over 15,000 school lunches. That's what that money could have gone to instead. Instead, they spent it banning a book, and that's extremely common. Your book has since been banned in counties in Florida. Can you say a little bit about the book's purpose, your experience of the challenges, and why you think this book has been targeted?
Yeah, God, that's a lot of money, right? So the book's purpose, I tend to write things that I feel like don't exist yet, right? So looking at the landscape of young adults, middle grade, books for young readers, ironically, mostly adults have read that book, but I love that too. I saw that we were having conversations that were teetering on race, and you know, that book was written in 2018 originally. It came out in 2020, so ironically, it obviously came out, you know, intersecting with the moment of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, so on and so forth. And I wanted to have honest conversations, right? Conversations about things we didn't talk about when I was in school, like you can't touch a black girl's hair, you can't touch a black person's anything, you know, and all these different things that I think now are becoming kind of common sense, hopefully in certain places in the country, but they most certainly weren't in 2018, 2019, 2020. And so the book was written. I'm not even sure that I necessarily wanted to have that be my first book, but it felt as though it was necessary. And as soon as the book came out, people were excited about it on both ends of the spectrum. Excited because there was something to do when they were finished with Costco, and also excited because they could learn. It just so happened that there were actually more people who were finished with Costco than to learn. So for as many books as we have sold, and it has performed very well, that amount, that $30,000 spent to ban the book, there's another number, for example, that was more than that district spent on new books in the last 5 years.
Oh, wow.
And we've seen that across the board, where the book's been challenged, where people, there was a young girl in Beacon, New York, who had taken the book out from the library, and her father not only took it and ripped the book up and tagged me on social media, he actually burned all of her books.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, so I'm not sure that I necessarily answered the question, but yeah.
You did, and I guess, you know, expanding on the book's purpose, I guess I just want to think a little bit about the impact that having anti-racist books in libraries could have on the kids in that school And then conversely, the impact that banning anti-racist books can have. What I mean, I guess it's kind of obvious, right? But what message does that send to kids who are in schools where these books are being banned?
Yeah, I mean, the impact it has, I can give you an example. I was recently in San Diego for an author visit, and I thought that I was coming to a school that, you know, a teacher had found the book and decided that everyone should read it. What actually happened when I was on that author visit was a student got the book for Christmas, and the student forced the school to make sure all the teachers read the book. And then the English department picked the book up. So it started with a student who felt as though it was the first time that they had been seen in anything that they had read. They said there were characters, I was young Latina, she said there's characters that are Latina, there's characters that are Latino, but they're not books that we have read that address the way that people are harming us in the school. Right, harming us in the classroom. And I want all of my teachers to read it so that all of my classmates can read it. And that's the impact, right? That is the impact. Adversely, you know, the very concept of book banning is to control the minds of people, right? I think that at the root cause of the entire thing, people understand that they want whomever was harming that young girl in this school to continue to do so. Right? And how do you continue to make sure that she is harmed, that she feels othered? The white kids in the class don't have the book. The cishet kids are not learning about transphobia. The straight kids are not learning about homophobia. This is the reason why these things happen. It's all by design, and that's why I think that the battleground for the future of this country, quite frankly, is in the library, in these books.
Thank you. Eliot, The Darkness Outside Us was banned on at least one occasion in Collierville, Tennessee. It's a YA sci-fi romance about two boys who fall in love, and I've heard it's being developed as a feature by Eliot Page. Is this Eliot, this wealth of Eliots true?
What is the collective noun for group of Eliots?
We'll figure it out later. Can you share a little bit about what you know about bans targeting your work and what some of the motivations are, but then also how those bans have impacted you as a person and as a writer?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's been an interesting journey because The Darkness Outside Us came out in 2021, and I had a book come out the following year called Queer Ducks and Other Animals, The Natural World of Animal Sexuality, which is a nonfiction work about the diversity of sexual expression in the animal kingdom. And those were both for YA audiences. This crisis was just really getting started when Darkness Outside Us came out, and then was well underway when Queer Ducks came out in 2022. And so I think something that's very hard to put your finger on is the soft censorship effect of a lot of these bans, where it's not that this is in a school system and is being removed, but it is not being acquired because the librarians are at risk in their jobs, and acquiring those books might cause them to lose their jobs or feel unsafe within these schools. I definitely sympathize with the people making these choices to restrict the books that bring them in just to stay in their jobs and to keep food on their plates. But so Darkness Outside Us was removed from only one school, but as part of like a list of thousands of books with LGBT content that were being removed from schools across the country. Queer Ducks had an interesting journey in that as a YA nonfiction title, my publisher assumed we would live in institutions. We'd be in schools and libraries primarily, and then maybe some bookstore piece to it. It was required by virtually no schools and libraries. I mean, the first word in the title is queer, so there's no, like, it's clear in the catalog, the library catalog, what the book is about, so there is no even smoke screen to hide it behind. And lived in bookstores instead and kind of found its way, but it wound up getting a Prince honor, which means it's from the ALA, and that means a lot of school libraries will automatically acquire the books that are there. And that was 9 months into its life, and then it entered all the schools where these fights from Moms for Liberty and other organizations are well underway. And then everything hit the fan. And so at this day and age, if I'm a gay writer of books, LGBT books for young people, like I need the definition of pornography in my back pocket. Like I've memorized it because that is the word that is attached to LGBT books, including Entango Makes Three, which is a beautiful picture book about two doting penguin parents that happen to both be male. That's called pornographic, even though there's no sex or something mentioned. Even the word gay isn't in that book. But so I had to intent to sexually titillate. That became a place, for whatever reason, queer ducks in Wisconsin have had a long journey together. It's been removed from tons of schools in Wisconsin. And I got a call from a reporter at a local TV station saying, we have, your queer ducks has been removed from a local high school, and would you be willing to comment on camera about it? And she showed me footage of a mom at a school board meeting, straight from Costco, red in the face, crying about the pornographic material that her kid was reading in this book. And she said the word orgy is in this book. We shouldn't have a book with the word orgy in it in my kid's high school. And the reporter was like, so what would you say to this mother? And I said, yeah, then the word orgy is in Queer Ducks and Other Animals. It's in chapter 6. Chapter 6 is about fruit flies. I'm just discussing the ways in which fruit flies reproduce, and I do describe it as an orgy, but if it's meant to drive sexual titillation and she's, driving that from this chapter, that's really on her, not on me, or on the kid who wants to read this book. Like, that's more of a personal journey, but it's like so absurd, right? To have the idea of pornography attached to it. And it just makes me think, it's rather than wanting to retreat, it makes me want to get louder, because I realized I was gay when I was in 6th grade. I was in Clearwater, Florida, a very purple area, and in 1992, the way that we talked about gay people was that they all should die, right? That they should be sent to an island to die. Like, that was the best outcome. Like in the cafeteria table in 6th grade, that was what we all resolved was the best course. And the day before I hit puberty, I was like, that sounds good, they're weird, like why are they doing that? I hit puberty, realized I was gay, it was like a switch went off. And all of a sudden that was me, this person that we were all saying should die. And the place I went to was the library. I went and I looked up homosexuality in the encyclopedia, in the Safety Harbor Middle School library, figure out like what is going on, why is this happening, what is it about? And we define ourselves as communities by the books that are in our libraries. And the stories that we are willing to tell within those libraries says you are part of us and you are not other. If you have a book about you in your library. And libraries they have thousands of volumes in them. They have the room to have all the stories of kids that feel alone. Like my brother is about to go to prison, is there any book about that? And a librarian can say, yes, we have one about that. And you can read it and feel your journey is expressed. And so much of this movement is about causing those kids that are on the verge of feeling other or outside to be more so. And when you see the crisis in suicidality among LGBT teenagers, Schrefer Project, most recent number was 43% have considered suicide in the last year. And this movement is actually almost trying to push that number higher. It's almost the goal. So it just makes me even more furious, and I'm glad for publishers, booksellers, and organizations that are working to roll back what's trying to be done.
Niña, at least 2 books you've illustrated have been targeted with bans. Ways to Make Sunshine by Renee Watson was challenged in Sumner County, Tennessee, and I Promise by LeBron James was banned in York County, Pennsylvania. How did you learn about these bans, and how has it impacted you as an illustrator?
So I learned about Ways to Make Sunshine from the author, from Renee herself. She had contacted me and she asked me, like, we were trying to sync our schedules to see if we can do in that district in Tennessee. And when I asked her why, and she told me, I was just really confused. It's a middle grade series. And I remember reading the book front and back. I found nothing, offensive or inappropriate about it. And, Renee wrote that book because she was with Beverly Cleary, and she wanted to write something in that similar format of a middle grade kid going through, middle grade things. And, there was nothing different about it. It was just, she was just going through like school changes, like her friendships were evolving, they were moving to another house, anything that middle graders anybody could relate with. And when she told me, when I found out it was banned, I was really disappointed, I guess, just to be reminded that there are still people out there that would rather hold on to their prejudices and fear, then grow and evolve and learn and go outside of themselves. And with I Promise, I actually didn't know that. I had no idea. This is the first time I'm hearing it, so wow. It's a picture book. I'm very curious as to why it was banned. I mean, was it LeBron's positive affirmation? I mean, and if it wasn't, it's gotta be the pictures then. Was it, and I wonder what it was about the illustrations that they found so strongly, like they were so against it that they would take it away and I'm thinking, I drew kids who were shaking hands playing basketball after a basketball game. And I drew kids riding down the streets after school, riding down with their bikes after school. And I don't know, was it the bullhorn the spread of the bullhorn where I just went to town and just drew colorful hearts all over it? I don't understand what the ban was. And, when people make attempts to exclude, especially when it comes to books like this, it adds more fuel to my fire. And that fire being, I think most of us are here, if not all of us, are here because there's a lack of representation out there, especially when we were growing up. So these are books that we needed, and these are books that kids need right now too. And it's unfortunate that we now live in this world where we'd rather take the book right off the shelf and not even discuss it. And it just, I know my purpose as a picture book illustrator is to prepare our kids for the world. And when you ban books like I Promise, it just tells me that you don't, like a book that has everyone in it, just tells me that you don't believe that everybody should be seen, it's very hurtful. And this is a perfect example of why none of these book bans are reasonable at all. Yeah.
I want to ask now some general questions that, anyone can jump in as they see fit. I want to think a little bit about this idea of the chilling effect, which is what a lot of any of us who are doing activism against book bans think about. And, Eliot, this is something that you referred to a little bit as we see bans shifting from things that go through a formal challenge process that we can document, right? To books not being bought in the first place, to publishers maybe having to think twice about what they look to publish, though so many publishers are doing incredible work trying to resist book bans in their own practices, to authors self-censoring. So I'm curious how you or other authors have experienced any kind of the chilling effect, some way that bans kind of work that isn't necessarily through a documented process.
So I think that there's been great strides made, but last I checked, I think that less than 7% of published authors are Black. And so with that being said, what oftentimes happens is you're not only fighting an uphill battle, you're now fighting an uphill battle with a giant boulder rolling down at you with book bans, right? Because ultimately, the publishing industry is like any other industry where people have to see a return of their investment. So I'll use my book, my first book, The Black Friend, as a really good example. And I think that you sort of touched on this as well. Whether you have hard bans, soft bans, challenges, so on and so forth, not every book that is challenged or banned becomes this national sensation, right? There are thousands upon thousands of books every single year that are challenged or banned. You'll never hear of them, especially by marginalized authors, right? And so with my book, for example, while the book made the New York Times bestseller list, it was on there for weeks and weeks, what ended up happening with that book actually was that many distributors, funny enough, Costco, and I'm not just saying that Costco was one of them, the book was being so challenged that what they decided to do after a few months of it being out, because I don't know if many people know this, but publishing is also a consignment business. So you can actually return books, like distributors, Costco, Target, can say, hey, this book is not going to sell, we're going to return it to the publisher. And so where you might have thought you had sales, you actually now have a deficit. So my first book, to this day, is actually in deficit. Because Costco, after seeing the success of it when it came out, purchased 60,000 copies to be printed, right? And when it was being challenged in certain places around the country, they decided that it was too overwhelming. They returned 60,000 copies of my first book to my publisher, right? And so now what ultimately happened was all the books that I've written since on my profit and loss statement, right? Because everyone goes by a P&L, do you sell well, do you not sell well? That is a mark against me. So even though my book was a massive success, on paper it actually wasn't, right? Based on that. And so for something like my forthcoming novel this May, which is my debut novel, it's about book bands, ironically. But I actually made less on this novel. My advance was less than my very first advance on my very first book because of that return. And so what ends up happening is publishers, as much as they may be trying to help and trying to do the right thing, it is working, right? Like these book bans challenges, soft bans are absolutely working to detrimentally harm marginalized authors, and as a Black person, I can say very specifically, oftentimes Black authors.
Blow my mind with this return thing. No, I'm just literally just sitting here, just like, oh my god.
Goddamn Costco. Yeah.
One thing that's very true about publishing is it is a very slow industry, partly because we writers are slow, so it might take us 2 years to write a book, it might take 5 years to write a book. Then once it's acquired, it might be 2 years, 2.5 years until it comes out. So we're really now seeing the initial consequences of the beginning of this organized book banning crisis. And I do think for a while it was like, look at all the books that are still coming out. You know, like we're continuing to diversify the kind of voices we're seeing. And I do kind of informally see more now kind of the effect, the financial effect of this, that we do see a rollback in the diversity of books that are coming out, just anecdotally. I know on the author side, it's interesting to see the opportunities to interface with kids are almost at zero as an LGBT author now. I talked to like 12 to 15 schools a year. I got to know every small city in America, because I would like fly to Cincinnati to visit a school system for 4 days and then fly back. And those went from 12 to 15 to 0 last year and 1 this year. And it is this way in which it's one thing to have a book in your library, to actually say all the kids are coming down to an assembly to hear this author speak just makes it a lightning rod for the community. So you find anyone who's not in a very progressive area is just pulling back on inviting just about any author, not just marginalized authors, because it's already like just this moment where we will bring attention to those books, and if there's a tweet that then the local parents get upset about, then the fire gets started. So it's that chilling effect has been very real, and it's such a shame because there's so many kids that, like, you know, you present to a room full of kids and one of them comes up to you and like, wait, you wrote a book and you're alive? Like, you realize that all the authors were dead. Like, we had to be dead. And like this magical moment. Yeah, like I realized, like, oh my gosh, I could do that too. Like, you're a real person, then you did it. And those opportunities are going by the wayside, which is a big shame out of this moment.
Also, just a new fun thing is the threats against, when you're in the country, if a librarian, a teacher, like if you do something like Y'all Fest where you would see like there would be thousands, librarians and teachers show up for stuff in just such amazing numbers. Like they show up and they're like, I have this kid and I have this, like they'll buy all these books and be like, this is for this kid, this is for this kid, sign it to this kid. I'm like, where were you all my life? Like, we didn't even have a library I went to a Catholic girls' school, and I'm not Catholic, it's complicated, but we weren't even allowed. There was like a Catholic encyclopedia in there and nothing else, except a broken copier, which we weren't allowed to use. But I always say, like, what's going, how are you doing? What's going on with you? And, the idea, they're like, yeah, so we got a threat, that someone's gonna come in and shoot us, and you never, this whole idea of threatening people has been really, really amped up recently. Or, we go in and we, take the books out of the book drop, get a death threat, they just are like, and then, we do our jobs. That's new. They're really becoming more spiky. We've certainly seen a turn in the tone of, violence being everywhere, and they've really become like, oh, you're gonna try to, the word they like is groom our kids. That's a word that has actual meaning, that's not this. And threaten violence. It's not everywhere, but it's like a surprising number of librarians, like if you do a bunch of stuff, you're like, that is too many people that have just said, yeah, we've been threatened. Yeah, we did a drag performer in a week, read a book about monies to kids, someone threatened them with a bomb. That's new. Their types of threats are new. I'm not doing the thing where you're supposed to say positive stuff.
Don't worry, I got it. Next
Great.
question. Next question is, again, we have to stay positive. We're building an incredible movement all over the country. Maureen, you shouted out Authors Against Book Bans. Amazing, amazing work, mobilized really quickly from coast to coast. What I'd like to know is, from any of you who want to speak on it, is what's one thing that people can do to make a difference, to support a banned author or a banned illustrator, or to, in some other way, show up for literary culture in their community?
Real easy. Buy gift if you can, and most importantly, read it. Read the book. Get to know the material that's being challenged and find out why. Form your own opinions on it and build talking points on it as well, so that if you do find yourself in a position where you want to support the author, you have talking points to defend the material. And then send it to others.
I have two quickies. One is, I think often when you go to a library or a school and there's a banned book display, it's 1984, Catcher in the Rye, and those books are still challenged and banned. But it's the old model of banning where a parent sees a kid, this book in the kid's black backpack, and says, I don't want my kid reading Huck Finn. That's actually a very healthy conversation, I think, that happens between parents and schools. But maybe when we see those displays, to say like, oh, here are 5 books that were banned, the top 5 banned books in the last 3 years, and like maybe we could also include some of those in the displays. And they're less safe feeling titles, I think, for a lot of people. But it's important to keep, I think, those books up at the fore. And the other little piece I would say is we did a panel sort of like this for the ALA, the American Librarian Association. And there were like 500 librarians in a room, all fired up about how to support each other in this moment. And we left at another event to go to, and I walked by like 2 hours later, and there were still 25 librarians at one of those conference room tables, hunched over, like making strategies. And so I just stopped by a table, and I was like, what did you guys figure out? Help us out here. And they said, really, we need young voices and pre-crisis. So to speak the values of the community before the banners get loud. To go to school boards and say, it's not even on the agenda yet that anyone's complaining about a book, but here are books that I love. I love this book, this picture book about 2 gay penguins, this one about Rosa Parks. These are what's important to me, and to say that so the school board knows it before someone comes in and starts challenging books left and right. So they have this bedrock of the community's values, which are this quiet majority that is all against this. This is very unpopular. Everyman Library did a study, 80% of Democrats, 70% of independents, and somewhere between 50 and 60% of Republicans are against any book bannings or removals of any sort. So it's a loud minority that we need to speak against ahead of time.
Yeah, I think those are phenomenal suggestions. I think to expand on that, I think that the idea of like the 1984 and the books that we know, the Scarlet Letter and so on and so forth, Huck Finn, we do have, kind of right now, the 20 books that everyone kind of knows are banned and challenged, and quite frankly, they're getting a lot of airtime, as they should. I think I would also challenge people to go look in that thousands and thousands of books that are being challenged, and look for the author who's from, upstate New York, who didn't have the massive selling book, and see what it's about, right? And help that book get legs. And that means, as you said, purchasing the book, it means gifting the book. But to lean into the library thought, right? Ask your local library to order these books, right? I think that people oftentimes forget that, I know this is a really rough economy. Not everyone has the money to go out and buy a $20 book. But you can seek out your local library and ask them to order it so that you can read it, so that someone else can read it. And I think that that's imperative right now, to really lean into libraries.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing I was gonna say, is use the library. Actually use it. You already are here, so you did it. But they need to see people coming through the doors, using the resources, because as you know, we had a huge battle in the city about, library funds trying to be ripped away. It went weird. Weird things have happened recently. It's a weird day here in New York. But what the work being done in this library through the initiatives here means that kids all over the place are getting to read bad breaks. These libraries are radiating out their work. There are so many librarians who are like, just come in and use what we've got. That way, when we have to fight for funding and do all our battles, we'll be like, look at all the people that have come in. Look at all the stuff that we're doing. So literally just using the library is one of the most valuable, simple, and it's fun and easy, and this one's super nice, so it's no hardship to use it. But yeah, just using library is in and of itself a really strong way to just keep these institutions alive.
And I wanted to end with this question because it's time to switch from awareness raising to mobilization. Enough is enough. And luckily, if I needed someone to have my back, I would want it to be librarians and booksellers and authors, and that's exactly who's on top of it. But it's not enough. It needs to be average people going to their school board, figuring out what to do about it, talking to their state legislatures. So with that, I think we can go to audience questions, right?
I'm gonna take this mic. We're gonna start right up here.
Thank you. I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that banned books is as bad now as it was in 1982. Did I mishear that?
That might have been me, but yeah.
Oh, what happened in 1982? It was just...
So with the caveat that I wasn't born yet. So. In 1982, it was, right now one of the main groups who are responsible for this is a group called Moms for Liberty. In the 70s and 80s, it was a group called the Moral Majority.
Oh, yes.
Remember them? A lot of,
Some of us were born.
Yes.
I remember it.
Yeah, so Jerry Falwell, I Love America rallies, they were dressed like The Handmaid's Tale. It was a horrible vibe. And they were targeting many of the same themes, but it was sort of a different moment in terms of targeting Judy Blume's Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. A lot of other books that were more about this kind of forcing a puritanical way of thinking on everybody. So a lot of the strategies, a lot of the arguments were built then, but they've sort of just taken a different form.
May I ask another question? Just like Pete Buttigieg going on Fox News, have any of you been tempted or actually gone to a community where your books were banned? And if you did, please tell us about it.
Yeah. So I actually went to the Houston district that is banning that book and spent all that money. It's so funny, to your point, no one has read the books. They never do, and they don't even have an argument. And I think that part of the issue in this country right now especially with the advent of social media, is everyone lives in these online spheres where there's not only no accountability, but there's no real conversation, right? So you get me in person to actually have a conversation about my book, and now you expect that I'm gonna come, how dare you? No, let's talk, and you don't know what to do with it, right? You literally don't know what to do with it, and funny enough, one of the parents who was adamant about banning my book literally emailed me the other day, I'm looking forward to your next book. Because we sat down for a half an hour and talked through it. And I think that's another reason for book bans. Books are a conversation.
Yeah.
Books are a way of feeling less alone. And when we have those conversations, when we feel less alone, we move forward together. And I think that right now, what we need to figure out is how we move forward together.
Wonderful. Any other questions?
I actually do have a question. I was kind of particularly horrified to hear about something happening in Beacon, New York, because I consider that almost the metropolitan area. And I would like to know, has anything gone on in New York, including all the 5 boroughs, that we should know about, and something maybe even in Brooklyn that we should know about? And I guess that's my question.
I'm not aware of any recent bans within the 5 boroughs, though I would repeat that soft censorship is a huge problem and it's really, really, really hard to identify. But what I can say is that the same groups who have been responsible for book banning have also been able to get their members on school boards in District 2 in New York, which is the biggest school district in the city, and pass a whole bunch of anti-queer, anti-trans policies there. And if the mobilization to get those people out and to prevent more of them from getting onto the board isn't successful, it could very easily lead to book bans.
Where is it? Where is District 2?
It's kind of a weird shape. I think it's the lower part of Manhattan and then up the east side. Anyone else?
I think that's right.
Yeah.
There's one situation in Staten Island
That's
where a bunch of books were found basically in trash that had been kind of culled from a library collection that had stickies on them and said this book discusses, inappropriate because it discusses race or whatever. And there's sort of an ongoing investigation. Authors Against Book Ban has submitted a whole bunch of FOIA requests to try to figure out who did it and what is going on. But yes, that happened in Staten Island a few months ago. So that is one ongoing.
That's New York Public Library. I was a librarian trainee there. A lot of people don't realize that Staten Island, unless something has changed, is part of the New York
Yes.
Public Library.
Yeah.
So, it's, the whole library itself should be, people on 42nd Street or wherever they're headquartered should be doing something.
I think that was at a school.
Yeah, exactly.
That one
Oh,
was
it's
at
a school? Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
it was a school library.
Do you know which school that was? I did, but my brain is dying. So I don't really know exactly. Question over here. You could probably Google it. Yeah, if you could, there's a big article about it in Optimist, there's a whole bunch of press about it.
Going back to what you were saying about they never actually read the books, I feel like they can kind of get away with that because groups like Moms for Liberty go to the organizational or logistical work of making it basically frictionless for someone who wants to show up at a school board meeting and challenge a book to do that. They'll post lists of books that you can scour your school library for, your public library for, and show up and challenge. They'll publish lists of talking points to try to, be the most controversial or the most sort of incendiary bases to challenge a book. And so when someone then wants to challenge a book, it's essentially frictionless for them to do so, right? It's very little effort. And doing the work of building the connections, reading the books, talking about them, having conversations, moving forward together, that is time and effort. And it's worth it, right? It's valuable time and effort, but it's a slower organizing process than what Moms for Liberty is doing. So what can we do generally to make it easier to combat the challenges, to make the response, right, accessible to more and more people.
I can just say that, for example, for the point of Authors Against Books Ban, which is a new organization, one of the goals of it is, since we're the people that wrote it, to try to say, if there's a school board issue or something, getting an author to show up and be like, look at me. Now tell me what your problem is. And like you were saying, like sometimes when you go, you're like, or hearing when you hear a story, or you can say, you have a response like, that's not in the book, or do you want to have a conversation about it? That's not helpful to a general answer. That's just me thinking out loud about like, but school board meetings, any kind of meetings, it's so tedious to show up to them. Like they're rough. They're like 90 hours long. They're like, we're gonna put a sidewalk on our sidewalk. But it's that kind of thing where people showing up for stuff like that makes a difference. Because you will find that when they bloviate and they get any kind of challenge, they are really unprepared for it. And you can take that, like you can kind of turn that quicker than you think. Now they show up.
One thing that's helpful to remember is you're exactly right about Moms for Liberty creating this frictionless process. And they have these flick sheets where you can go and you just download a PDF where it's got 3 quotes from the book taken out of context that they can be read aloud during the 1-minute comment. And out of context, those quotes do make the book seem really prurient. But I think what I always try to remember is that on the organizational level, this is a very cynical way to drive out a voting base and get them fired up around a cultural issue that wins elections. But it wins primary elections, not national ones, and I think we're kind of seeing the fact that this is actually kind of a stinker on a national level, and we see some pulling back on a higher level from the funding sources, the conservative think tanks are like energizing this, that it's actually kind of losing national elections potentially. We'll see how this November goes. But on the ground level, the people coming in that are upset about books and want them removed, those people are not thinking on that political way, and they are thinking in this emotional place of fear, like that given their information sources that something terrible is being done to their children, and they're trying to protect their children and see themselves as their children's advocates, even though the information is wrong and what they're implying about this like cis white version of what literature should be is wrong. I think seeing them in that emotional place and recognizing that you are your child's champion, and that's great. And here's my experience, and here's why I wrote the book. And having that conversation, actually one-on-one human conversation, I think is part of the cure on this, on the smaller level at least.
I have a slightly wonkier answer, I think, which is that I like the idea of trying to make it frictionless and thinking about how can we introduce as much friction into the book challenge and book ban process as possible is really, really important. Forcing people to, like one thing we can do, force people to fill out separate challenge forms for each book that they want to challenge. Bare minimum, right? Right? So you can't just copy and paste the list of the books. And I also have more statistics, sorry. 11 people in, I think it was 2023, were responsible for 60% of the book challenges in the country.
Oh my God.
11 people, that's from the Washington Post. The reason that is able to happen is because of book challenge policies and request for reconsideration policies that are designed to make that possible or are underthought and leave themselves open to that kind of attack. So really common sense things like making sure that the person challenging a book is actually a parent in the district, making them fill out separate forms, making them assert that they have read the book. People can lie, but you never know who will founder on that particular rock. And just other things like, I don't know too many districts that do this, but I would love you would need to get maybe a few other parents to agree with you that the book should be banned before initiating this process. Little things like that to just introduce friction. So it starts with figuring out what the policy is in your school board, which is something everyone can do. Figure out what your school board is, find their policies, look for collection development policies or request for reconsideration policies and just try to understand them. This is part of what I was trying to do in the Right to Read handbook, was to just provide some general information about how that is possible.
I think we have time for one more question right here.
As authors who have been banned, do you find yourself self-censoring when you're producing new work?
Yes, I think because, the book that's back there, it's a poetry collection, it's my 5th book now. So the book that was primarily banned is my first book. And my second book was actually also banned in prison. So I write across categories, so I write for adults and young people, so on and so forth. And what I found is more so for adults, is my second book is about patriarchy, unpacking homophobia, transphobia, misogynoir, all the lovely tentacles of patriarchy. And when I was going in to write this collection of essays that I'm working on now, knowing how banned my book was in prisons, I found myself pulling back from some of the criticisms that I had of the country, patriarchy, and things like that from my second book. So not necessarily in a youth space. I think that's where we're like, yeah, we're energized, teach the young people. What I get stuck with is the adults, actually. Right? Do the adults want to have honest conversations? Because that's the thing about book bans, right? Young people want the conversations. Do the adults want to have the conversations? Because by the time you get to adulthood, a lot of times you're already set in your ways. And so I found myself having to step back and have a conversation, because at the end of the day, to the point that's been made multiple times, this is a business. This is our livelihood, right? And if your book is banned, you can't pay your bills. So yeah, I think for me, it definitely was something I had to address, and luckily I don't really care at this point. I'm just, it is what it is, but yeah.
I find I'm just kind of, I'm inoculated by it because of the breadth of the banning. If it's, Moonrise for Mooncake, a beautiful Grace Lin novel about Chinese culture and making cookies, is banned. It's not like there's a few words I can change that are going to prevent a book that I'm writing from being banned. If it were like 25 books that were just under fire every year, I'd be like, how can I not be one of those 25? Like, what can I do? Like, it is so ludicrous that there's no changing it. And as a result, it just makes me want to get louder and more honest about what I'm trying to say.
All right, then that's all the time we have tonight. Let's give our panelists a round of applause. Thank you all for joining us tonight. I also want to thank you all for joining us and being a part of this extremely necessary conversation. Now is your chance to go the extra mile and support these authors, not only by buying their books, but also by supporting BPL and libraries across the country with Books Unbanned. Every purchase, a portion of that will go towards it, and you're also welcome to make a donation of your choice. And be sure to pick up a copy of the Right to Read handbook, so you have all of this incredible information in your bag, in your pocket, right next to you all the time. The authors will all be around to sign your books, so feel free to grab them from my lovely coworker Alexa in the back, and then we're gonna have y'all line up down this wall to my right, and just come up to the table if you want to get your book signed. Yeah, that's all we have tonight. Let's give all of these panelists a round of applause. Thank you all so much.